Scientists of Reddit, what are some scary scientific discoveries that most of the public is unaware of? Super gonorrhea is resistant to the vast majority of strong antibiotics, including fluoroquinolones and macrolides. And gonorrhea is mutating all the time to resist antibiotic effects. There have been multiple reports of super gonorrhea in Australia, England, etc. You probably have to have sex to get it, so most of us are safe. I realize this is meant in jest. But I also wonder, how many adult virgins are on Reddit? Does the proportion correlate to that of the general population? Pretty sure the percentage is higher on Reddit. Although it's one of the 4 most popular sites in America, so the effect is probably not very strong. Major solar coronal mass ejection apocalypse. The thinking goes that the big one, when it hits, about once every 500 years, if not sooner, would be powerful enough to knock out electrical and communications systems across Earth for days, months, or even years, nixing power grids, satellites, GPS, the internet, telephones, transportation systems, banking, you name it. Edit. Thanks for all the comments. I think the biggest factor here would be the fact that nobody would know what happened. In a fear-fed world, this would lead to rumors and civil unrest very quickly, people running to get guns, food, taking advantage of the chaos to commit crimes, etc. It would be a nasty scenario. Oh yes. The most relevant recent incident was the Carrington event of 1859. The analog world of the time remarked that some telegraph operators were continuing to send and receive messages after disconnecting the device's power supplies. Today, the disruption would be catastrophic and highly unpredictable. Like, for example, what would the results of a toxin pulse into the world environment be like after a billion small electrical fires ignite tons of plastic and solder? The total breakdown of the delivery network would instantly start the 6 weeks to starvation countdown. And then there's the unfortunate fact that the vast majority of people in my country, at least, have no survival skills whatsoever. And the first thing they'll do for answers is reach for their non-functional phones. Motherfucking Walmartians'll be barbecuing their neighbors within the week, you watch. Many people may be silent carriers for mad cow disease and won't know for another decade or so. Mad cow disease from the 1980s and 1990s was due to cows being fed the remains of other animals. People then ate their beef and consumed prions, a protein that can destroy the human brain. It's thought that many people still might carry prions but won't know until they start experiencing the symptoms of Creutzfeldt-Jakob disease or bovine spongiform encephalopathy, which might be 10–50 years after consuming the contaminated meat. It has a long incubation period. You can also contract the prions from blood transfusions, which is why so many UK citizens from that time period still aren't allowed to donate blood. Once the symptoms begin, cognitive impairment, memory loss, hallucinations, etc., you usually die within months. There is no cure or treatment. My spouse knew a guy who died of Creutzfeldt-Jakob disease last year. He was in his early 60s and had just retired. One day, his eye began twitching. Not the eyelid, the eye itself, making it difficult for him to see well. Within 3 weeks, he was in a vegetative state. He died a short time later. The replication crisis in psychology, though the problem occurs in many other fields, too. Many studies aren't publishing sufficient information by which to conduct a replication study. Many studies play fast and loose with statistical analysis. Many times you're getting obvious cases of p-hacking or hacking, hypothesis after results known, which are both big fucking no-nos for reputable science. And then all the research that gets repeated only to find null results over and over again, and none of it gets published because of the null results. Research is incredibly inefficient. The emphasis placed on publishing, at least within the academy, can incentivize quantity over quality. I would love to start a journal that publishes null results. Anyone want to get in on this? Null results are just as important as statistically significant results. Prions are so crazy. It's just a malformed protein. Yet, somehow it teaches other protein to fold themselves improperly. The human body has no defense against it. Truly terrifying. And they're generally only detectable through an autopsy of the brain, which means you gotta be dead first. Which is a massive pain even if you know a good necromancer. Pineapples have an enzyme that digests protein. So whenever you eat a pineapple, it is eating you back. It's the reason why you have to boil pineapple before embedding it in jello. The bromelain in the pineapple keeps the gelatin from setting. That explains so many jello salads at family get-togethers. The world has 70% less insects on average than it did 40 years ago. We really are coming up on our silent spring. For the people saying there are less pests, those aren't the ones we're worried about. Insect pollinators are vital to so many crops. We could be facing serious problems with certain food supplies soon. In recent years, China has had issues with apple and pear crops to the point where some regions have had to pollinate crops by hand. Also, insects form lower blocks of many food webs, and their disappearance will spell through for higher trophic levels. I was just discussing this with my best friend. Why aren't people freaking out over insecticide? This is about as bad a sign of planetary health as I can imagine. Abdominal aortic aneurysm. It's basically an aneurysm that happens in the big artery in the middle of the abdomen. It's fine and is usually asymptomatic, but when it ruptures, a patient loses all their blood within a short period of time. The scary part is that it usually is diagnosed by accident due to annual checkups for something else. Anyone can have the disease, but especially people with Marfan syndrome, smoking, hypertensive, and hyperlipidemia. I actually know 2 people personally who have died from that within the last 10 years. Yeah, my mom died from one about 9 years ago. She was 64 and went to the doctor with a persistent pain in her back and insisted on an X-ray and scan. They found a massive one, literally the words they wrote on the X-ray, and took her straight to the hospital. She had one operation to get her ready for the stent procedure and then it ruptured and she died a couple of days before her operation. The whole thing happened about 2 months after she retired. Otherwise totally healthy and relatively clean living.